I I don't I What the hell did I just read? This was so much. Holy shit. Okay. Where do I start with Harrow the Ninth Act 5? Um I okay, before I get to any of the insane stuff, the like plot stuff that happened, I just want to say that one of the first things that happens in this act is that we get a Griddlehark Coffee Shop AU written by the author into the source material. If you don't know what that means, you've made better choices in your life than I have. But also, that was amazing. And I just want to acknowledge how incredible that particular tidbit of this was. Moving on to more important things. Okay, I'm going to start with the Harrow part of this section, which is less interesting and less important, which is a weird thing to say in a book which is entirely about Harrow. But, okay, so, turns out I was wrong. None of my theories about what the quote-unquote memories that Harrow has been witnessing are have been correct. I thought that these memories might be either sort of the fake memories that Harrow implanted in her mind to replace the real memories. I'm talking about the Canaan House memories, where all the wrong things happen. Or that they might be sort of hallucinations that Harrow is having right now that are being sent to her from someone, where something, either Gideon or the body, are trying to communicate with her subconsciously, so that's why she's getting all these messages, like the weird pieces of paper that she reads that have like insane ramblings on them. It's none of those things. It turns out that the characters in these chapters are the actual people. Uh, you'll remember, I think either in the last video or in the one before that, I mentioned that I wonder how accurate what we're seeing of all the Gideon the Ninth characters in this book, how accurate that is, because it's all based on sort of Harrow's reconstruction of their personalities. I was wrong. It's not Harrow's reconstruction of their personalities. These are the actual people. Well, except for the ones who are still alive. So Corona Beth, Judith, and the Sixth House people. They're not real, but everyone else is real, which I could not have guessed in a million years, but I'm very happy about, because it means that the character development we got for these characters in this book is actually genuine. We got to actually meet the real Dulcinea and the real Protesilaus and get to know them. We got a ton of character from Abigail Pent that we didn't have previously. And probably most impressively and most importantly, we got to know Ortus Niganad, who was kind of like a mixture of like a joke character and like a pathetic character you were just supposed to pity in the first book. And he got written out of the plot like a couple of chapters in. Whereas here, he is one of the main characters of this book, and he is incredibly well developed and interesting and really gets to shine, which I found incredibly impressive. That ultimately he ends up saving the day, kind of, with his nerdy obsession with this historical figure, because his epic poem actually summons the guy, Matthias Nonius, and he saves the day. So that was cool. That was like one of my favorite scenes here is the moment when I realized that that's what Abigail was doing, that she was summoning Matthias Nonius from Ortus's poem. That was really cool. Now, Wake... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Sleeper. The Sleeper turns out to be, ironically, considering that, you know, the Sleeper and Wake, there's like a little joke there, I guess, in the names. The Sleeper turns out to be Commander Wake, the leader of the Blood of Eden, or at least the former leader. She's dead. Has been for 20 years, but also isn't. I'm not sure if the Blood of Eden knows she's still around. Anyway, yeah, it turns out to be Wake, and is very quickly excised from Harrow's mind, and sort of the entire plotline of what's going on in Harrow's mind is very neatly resolved and tied in a nice little bow. All the other characters go on to their eternal reward, and Harrow has a weird ending that we'll get to in a moment. Well, we'll get to towards the end of the video. But overall, that's half of Act 5. Goes down real smooth, and it's really clear everything that happens. There's no real loose ends there, except Silas. Silas is a major loose end, actually, because Silas jumped off a building in front of Harrow's eyes, and he's supposed to be real? That was the real Silas, I think? I'm going to assume that wasn't him just committing suicide and he actually did something and had some kind of plan. I'm going to assume that we will be seeing more of Silas Octokissaron in the future, which... Yay? I guess? He really sucks, but he is interesting, so... I'll take it. I still wish we got more Jean-Marie instead. But okay, I'll take freaking Silas. Yeah. So that's it for the Harrow half of this. And then we switch POVs back to the Mithraeum, to Harrow's body, which is now occupied by Gideon, who is still alive? Question mark? I'm not sure. It's a bit difficult to really judge what to call people like Gideon and Wake and what's his name? God damn it, I've forgotten his name. The Sixth House Necromancer. Crap. Can't remember his name. Palamedes. Palamedes. Like, are those three characters, should we consider them still alive? I mean, their bodies are dead and they're ghosts, but they're fully functional ghosts that are still fully conscious and can do things. So, I don't know. I don't know whether the right term for that is alive. I don't think it's undead, because undead would imply, like, animated corpses or something. I don't know. Anyway, that's beside the point. Gideon is still here. She still exists, and she is still actually the narrator of this book. It turns out that most of this book has been narrated by Gideon, which I guessed. So, Gideon wakes up in Harrow's body, which has been stabbed by Mercymorn, and then things proceed to happen at a completely mind-boggling speed. I don't know. So much happens. so much happens in like the next couple of scenes. So rather than tackling it in the order that it's revealed, I'm going to briefly try and reconstruct the full chronology of events that we now know. So, 10,000 years ago, something happens which wipes out all life on Earth, or the first house, which I'm still assuming is Earth, like our Earth. And this random guy named John somehow discovers necromancy and resurrects all of humanity, and also every planet in the solar system. And this creates resurrection beasts. He then, and he has a friend slash girlfriend slash lover slash sister slash something, close person, whose name is apparently Electo. And he and Electo perfect the lictorhood process. They discover it and they perfect it and they perform it on each other, and they both survive. No one has to die for their lictorhood. I'm assuming that this process is what turns John into like a godlike being. But anyway, I'm also assuming that this all happens before he ever meets any of the future lictors, because the future lictors do not know that his eyes ever looked anything different than they look right now, including Augustine, who is the first lictor. So John and Electo do the lictorhood thing with each other before John ever meets Augustine. Then John meets the lictors and trains them and teaches them the lictorhood process, but he doesn't teach them the perfected version, which allows the Cavalier to survive. He teaches them an imperfect version, which requires the Cavalier's death. My guess is that the reason he doesn't teach them the full version is either because the full version is really risky and does something incredibly messed up to the Cavalier, because we find out that Electo apparently became some kind of monster or something. Or because the full version would basically make them his equals. They would become gods like him, and he doesn't want them to be that. He wants to be the only god. Anyway, he lies to them. They kill their Cavaliers. They're very sad about it, but they're lictors now. Woohoo. And John and the lictors pack up, leave the 9 houses behind. Apart from Anastasia, who does figure out the perfect lictorhood process, so John kills her Cavalier to prevent her from doing it. He says he did it to save her life. I don't believe him. He seems incredibly untrustworthy right now. But suffice to say, he kills Samael Novinary, and Anastasia founds the 9th house, yada yada yada. John and the lictors pack up and leave the solar system. After the lictors convince John to quote-unquote kill Electo, which apparently he can't do, which makes sense because I'm assuming she's basically has the same power as him, meaning that she's truly immortal, as we see he is in this section. So he shoves Electo in the 9th tomb in some sort of eternal stasis, and locks it with a seal that requires his blood to open. And then he and the lictors go out, and they expand the empire for 10,000 years. And we still don't really know what's going on there, except that apparently it does involve a lot of conquest and genocide and murder of entire planets. I'm still not sure who the people on those other planets are. Are they also humans from Earth? Are they people that he resurrected? Or are they humans who had already colonized other planets before whatever happened to Earth happened? I don't know. We still don't really know the history of this setting very well. But anyway, he goes out, conquers, also fights a bunch of resurrection beasts. Everything that we already knew happens. The BOE is created, they fight back, yada yada yada. At some point during this process, some of the remaining lictors, most notably Mercymorn and Augustine, maybe some of the ones who are dead by now, I'm not sure, but certainly Mercy Morn and Augustine, decide to do a coup. They decide that John needs to go, that he's that his plans are evil or dangerous or whatever. They don't like how expansionist he is. They don't like his wars of conquest, and they make a plot to kill him, which apparently in their minds involves opening the locked tomb. They think that opening the locked tomb is a required step to killing John. We still don't know why. We still don't know what exactly Alecto is capable of, or why both Commander Wake and Mercy Morn and Augustine want to free her, but they do. And they make a deal with each other, Wake and the two lictors. The two lictors seduce John, get some of his sperm, give it to Wake, she impregnates herself, has a baby. The baby is Gideon, the ninth. And she flies to the ninth house, planning to basically bleed the baby on the door of the ninth tomb to open it. The ninth tomb, the locked tomb. Gideon the first catches up to her, kills her, doesn't tell John about the baby because he thinks it's his baby, because he was also sleeping with... He was sleeping with Wake, but also so was Pyra in his body. So two different people using the same body were in a relationship with Wake. I hope Pyra survived this book because I really want to know more about what was going on there. Anyway, yeah, that's how Gideon ends up at the ninth house. Then HARROW manages to open the locked tomb because she had Gideon's blood under her fingernails, basically, from a fight they had, if I remember correctly. And that's why the tomb opens for her. And then everything that we already know happens. Wake her spirit survives as a revenant. It possesses Gideon's two-handed sword at some point. And then at the start of this book, Wake, through the sword, compels HARROW to go to Cytherea's corpse and stab the sword into it so that Wake's spirit can pass into Cytherea's corpse. And then now, at the end of the book, when Mercy Morn and Augustine see Gideon's eyes in HARROW's head, they realize two things. First of all, they realize, oh, the baby survived and then grew up to become HARROW's cavalier, so obviously Ortus lied to us. But then also, oh, the baby doesn't have John's eyes, it has Alecto's eyes, which means that Alecto had John's eyes, which means that Alecto was John's cavalier, which means that he perfected the lictorship process and never told us, which means that he lied. So Mercy and Augustine basically snap, and especially Mercy, and decide to just immediately kill John. And that brings us to the present moment. Did I get everything? That's a lot, isn't it? And I didn't even go into the whole, like, how did Pyra survive, and how is she and Gideon the first body, and yada yada yada. So much happened here. We do get basically confirmation that, that the 9 houses are not in order. I had assumed that the first house was the closest planet to the sun, i.e. Mercury, and then that would make Earth the 3rd house. But I guess not, because it's mentioned here that the 6th house is the closest to the sun, because when John briefly dies and then comes back to life, he says, oh, the sun probably reacted to my death. I hope the 6th house didn't get burned. So the 6th house is the closest. Which begs the question why the houses were named in the order that they were. So that's another question I have. And there's also a bunch of questions I have about the ending in general, such as What's going on with Harrow and Gideon? Where is Harrow's spirit right now? She seems to have crawled into the into the locked tomb itself somehow. But I'm not sure if that was a literal event or like a metaphorical event. Gideon may or may not be dead in Harrow's body. We don't know what happened to Pyra in Gideon the First's body. Yanthe saved John, but Augustine and Mercy are dead. Gideon the First died fighting the Resurrection Beast. It's not clear if he took it down with him. I'm not clear on whether the Resurrection Beast is dead or not. And I'm also not clear on whether all the Cavaliers who went to help Gideon the First survived. Survived. They're all dead. And then at the very end of the book, we get the epilogue, which is from a completely new point of view. This random girl apparently being taken care of by Camilla on a planet which seems very Earth-like. I don't know what's going on there. I'm going to assume that random girl is Nona the Ninth, because that's the name of the next book. And then we get a little bonus chapter at the end of the book, which I don't think was in the original release of the book, which I'll talk about at the end of the video. So, let's talk about now that we've gone over what actually happened here. I mean, we haven't. I've actually skipped most of the events of this section, but this was sort of my attempt to see if I've managed to catch everything that happened. So, let's talk about some random details that stuck out to me. First of all, the interactions between Gideon and Yanthe, one of my favorite scenes in this entire series. Absolutely obsessed with that interaction. Absolutely. I ship Gideon and Yanthe now. I ship them more than I do Gideon and Harrow. That was just an amazing set of interactions. I will rip your ass off and Harrow will make you a bone ass. Perfect. Perfect interaction, no notes. The big final conversation with John, John reveals to Gideon that he is her father with the incredible line, "Hello, not fucking dead, I'm dad." Which feels like one of the... My first impression upon reading that was that Tamsin Muir came up with that moment first and then worked backwards to create the entire world and plot of the Locked Tomb series just in order to get to that moment. I don't know if that's true, but it felt like it. It was one of those, like, moments of, like, crowning achievement in terms of humor. Kind of like in Gideon the Ninth, when Gideon's first words to any other character other than Harrow were to tell Palamedes Sextus that his name can be rearranged into Sex Pal. That was a good moment too. But yeah. So during this scene, we get some fantastic characterization from Mercy Morn. Mercy Morn is... it's hard to tell whether Mercy Morn or Ortis are my favorite characters in this book. I really like both of them. They are both very compelling in their characterization. Ortis is mixed, like, Ortis has this mixture of sort of long-suffering loyalty to Harrow, but also he's kind of, like, done with her bullshit. Like, he has a very low opinion of himself, but he also has a very low opinion of her low opinion of him in, like, it's a really complicated and interesting mixture of character motivations going on in Ortis. Um, and with Mercy, you have this like mixture of love and hatred she has for John, and for Augustine as well. Augustine and Mercy sort of acknowledge at the end that they can't live without each other, even though they hate each other, because their hatred for each other is the most significant relationship in their lives. I feel like Augustine and Mercy kind of have a Gideon Harrow thing going on. Like for most of the first book, Gideon and Harrow are constantly at each other's throats, but that somehow ends up turning into this level of affection and connection and love that is required for the lictorship process, because it's the most significant relationship in their lives, even if it is a negative one. Which seems to be a bit of a running theme in the Locktomb series. Sort of these very negative, hostile relationships that still end up being important to people because they are the most important thing in their life. And it makes me wonder if we're going to learn that whatever is motivating John's conquest, because Mercy does mention that there is some kind of grand revenge plot that is motivating John, I do wonder if whatever is motivating John's conquests is going to end up being similar. Like this burning hatred that he feels for someone that is so strong that it is the most important relationship in his life. It feels like thematic setup, the way that this particular motif has appeared in both books so far. We also get the reveal that John is, as could probably be guessed early on, just based on the fact that he's the emperor of a expansionist necromantic empire, John is actually a monster. His affable persona that we've been seeing this whole book was kind of a ruse. I mean, not fully a ruse. Like, he's definitely human enough that both of the times that Mercy Morn and Augustine seduced him, it worked. So, like, he can be seduced, apparently. And I do think he cares about his lictors and all that, but he does have this, like, very cold and calculating side, and brutal and cruel side, that he normally does a good job of hiding. And once Mercy Morn attempts to kill him, he just drops the mask. So he is very much, I'm assuming, the main antagonist of this series at this point. I'm assuming that he's going to be the main villain of the remaining two books. But who knows? I mean, I've been surprised before. But even though he is a villain, I have to respectfully disagree with Gideon when she says that Ianthe saving John's life was the wrong choice. Because we so far have no reason to believe that John is lying about the fact that if he dies, Dominicus dies. Which means that killing John, as much as it would be a well-deserved punishment for his actions, would also be an act of genocide. You would kill 8 inhabited planets by doing it. So, no, Gideon, saving John was not the wrong choice. Ianthe almost certainly did it for the wrong reasons. I do not think Ianthe did it because she wanted to save the 9 houses. I think Ianthe did it for personal gain, personally. But it is absolutely the right thing to do, I think, in this situation. Like, killing John is pretty much morally unacceptable until you figure out a way to save everyone on the 9 houses. However, I was actually surprised that Ianthe did it, because I was actually expecting, when Mercy killed John, that was a surprise to me, because I thought that Ianthe was going to. The way I saw that scene playing out was that John was going to swear to Mercy that he loved her cavalier and that he loved all of their cavaliers, and Mercy and Augustine were going to sort of grudgingly accept that and be like, "Oh, okay. I mean, we get that you had to trick us into killing them, but you knew them, you loved them. It was also a sacrifice on your part, whatever." And I thought that then Yanthe was gonna step in and murder John and be like, "Yeah, that's cool, but you also tricked me into killing my cavalier, and you didn't know or care about him, so screw you." But no, apparently Yanthe does not care about Babs enough to do that. I thought that we were going to have some kind of twist where Yanthe was actually really torn up about Babs's death, but I guess not. I guess she's just a horrid person. Which I approve of as a character decision. The other thing I want to talk about here in Descending is the imagery. The visuals of the mouth at the bottom of the river drawing John and Augustine in as the space station sinks into the river and Yanthe floats above like sending tongues of blood to kill the actual tongues of flesh that are rising from the bottom. This book has some incredible imagery. I mean, so did the first, but this one is next level. Like this scene, the scene where Harrow fights the planet, some of the descriptions of Harrow's assassination attempt on Gideon the First. There are just so many moments in this book that are like imagery that will stick with me for the rest of my life. And usually books don't do that for me. Usually only visual mediums do. The two main ones I can think of off the top of my head are Berserk and Chainsaw Man. Berserk and Chainsaw Man both have this incredibly powerful imagery, in both cases accompanying not quite as powerful storytelling in my opinion. That's a topic for another video. But the imagery sticks with you forever. But this is the first time that a book with no visual elements has managed to just like project these visuals into my brain that I feel like I'm going to be visualizing for the rest of my life. Just absolutely incredibly powerful visuals in this book. This book also has infinitely better characterization than Gideon the Ninth. Gideon had good characters, especially the main ones, but very few of the secondary characters really stuck with me the way that literally all of them did in this book. Like, all the characters we have in this book are incredibly well realized, including the ones who are returning from the first book, who are much better realized here than they ever were there. There is just... Tamsin Muir is a master of character work, in my opinion. Up to and including her ability to characterize someone in, like, a couple of scenes. Like, she introduces a character towards the end of the book, and then immediately makes them a fully fleshed out, developed character. She did that with Cytherea last time. She did that with Wake to a maybe lesser extent this time. She did it with Mercy Morn. She did it with Pyra in the end, really, in this book. With Matthias Nonius as well. Just really, 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 really good characters. The prose, as always, is impeccable. I've praised that before. The references to sort of contemporary internet memes can be a bit much. They do kind of take one out of the book, in my opinion. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily a problem, because I'm beginning to suspect that there might be a reason for that. In much the same way that Wake's name contains Eminem lyrics, I suspect that we might find out that the apocalypse happened sometime in the early 21st century, and that as a result, a lot of our current contemporary cultural references sort of got canonized as basically like this setting's equivalent of biblical language, which is kind of hilarious if I'm right about that. So I'm hoping that I'm right about that, and that the meme references that crop up in this book are actually diegetically part of this culture. What else do I have to say here? Before I move on to the extra chapter at the end, let me just briefly look through my notes. Yeah, I want to talk about I'm going to talk about the final extra chapter at the end here. So if you haven't read that, if you've only read the on-release version of this book without the bonus journal by Judith Deuteros that is at the end, stop watching now. I'm really only going to talk about a couple of things. So we get a lot of important sort of plot hole filling details here. We learn how Judith is alive. We learn what's going on with her, Coronabeth, and Camilla. We learn how they got to where Harrow met them, which is that Judith got hooked up to to a steel, which we still don't know what the steels are necessarily, but they are implied to enable long distance travel, FTL travel of some kind, or maybe teleportation. So whatever is going on there, that's how they got there. We learn a bit about the Blood of Eden and their ideology. We learn why they oppose the Nine Houses. Well, we don't really. We learn vague details about sort of imperial expansion. Not enough for me to really talk about, I think. But we also get some interesting character tidbits. We learn, for example, that there's a bit of a sort of doomed star-crossed romance going on between Coronabeth and Judith, which is not the vibe I got in the first book, so that was a fun surprise. I hope we see more of that in the next book. And we also learned that the Blood of Eden apparently has Gideon's body, like our Gideon the Ninth. I mean, I guess that makes sense. If they picked all these people up from Canaan House, makes sense that that would be one of the things they'd pick up. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Part of me wants... So, I guess I'm just going to go straight into predictions for the next book. So, first of all, I predict that the girl we see with Camilla in the epilogue is Nona the Ninth. I don't know anything about who she might be, though. I predict that both Harrow and Gideon are still alive, and I predict that Harrow might be in Gideon's body now? Maybe? I predict that we will find out that the full lictorship process involves actually swapping bodies, which would mean that the person we have known as John this whole time is actually Alecto, and that the person in Alecto's body in the locked tomb is actually John. That's a bit of a wild card prediction, but that's just like the vibe I get right now. I've decided to just throw that out there without really any argumentation, because I don't have any. It's just the feeling I have. And my prediction is that now, somehow, Harrow and Gideon have done the same. And that Harrow is going to wake up in Gideon's body surrounded by Blood of Eden people, while Gideon is going to survive somehow, but survive within Harrow's body. What else? Obviously, Yanthe and John are both alive. I do think Pyra is also alive, actually. I think Pyra is alive. largely because I think it would be uninteresting if she wasn't. It seemed like interesting setup for future characterization, the introduction of Pyra here. So I'm going to assume she's alive. I don't think we'll see any of the characters from the first book who died again. Like the ones who passed on into the river at the end here. I think they're gone for good. Except for Silas, who is, like, it's clearly being set up that there's a mystery going on about where he is and what happened to him. And obviously Palamedes, who is in the bones that Camilla is carrying. So I'm sure we'll see more of Silas and Palamedes. Was Callum mentioned in this book? Silas's Cavalier? Was his name Callum? I think it was Callum. Was he even mentioned in this book? I honestly cannot remember if Callum was ever in Harrow's, like, Mind Palace version of Canaan House. Was he? I don't know. Huh. He did die in a really weird way, so maybe he got, like, sucked into the stoma or something. If Silas is still around in the next book, as I predict, maybe we'll learn what happened to Callum then. I obviously predict that, like I said, John is going to be the big bad of this series. I predict that Gideon and Harrow will be reunited at some point. But I don't necessarily predict a happy ending for them at the end of the series, but we'll see about that. I predict that by the end of this book, by the end of the next book, Nona the Ninth, Alecto will be awake and out of the tomb. I predict this primarily because the last book is called Alecto the Ninth. And that feels like a pretty good indicator that she is probably going to be around for that one. What else? I don't really have any other predictions, I think. Yeah, this ending has stumped me. There was so much going on here, in a good way. This was a very messy video. I don't think it fully communicated just how much I enjoyed this book, so let me just end by saying that I thought Gideon the Ninth was a great book, but not like a life-changing book. It was like a really good book and a fun read. This was like a 10 out of 10 in basically every respect for me. The world building, the characterization, the plot, the writing style, the prose, everything in this book was basically perfect. I cannot really think of any real criticisms I have of this book. I cannot think of anything I would have done differently. I am just sort of generally in awe of what Tamsin Muir has accomplished here. I will not be reading Nona immediately because The Lost Metal came out today, like literally today, perfect timing, so I'm going to start reading that now. By the time you see this video, actually, my videos on The Lost Metal will be out for a long time, so you will already have seen all that if you're following all the videos on my channel. But I don't think there'll really be a break for you guys between this video being uploaded and me starting Nona videos, because I am planning to, so after this I'm going to read The Lost Metal, then I'm going to read the second Soldier Sun book, and then I'm going to read Nona. And I'm probably going to keep doing the thing where I alternate weeks between Lock Tomb and Soldier Sun. See you in 2 weeks if you're just following the Lock Tomb videos. See you in 2 weeks to talk about Nona the Ninth, probably. Maybe? If not, it'll be because I've made some weird new choice. Who knows? I'm crazy like that. You never know what I'm gonna do next. Yeah, see you. This was really fun. This was really good. Bye.